Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Penalty Loop Podcast, a podcast about biathlon by Jordan Gottschalk from Penalty Loop and a regular guest, RJ Weiss from Biathlon Analytics.
We are coming to you live tonight to discuss the most important topic in biathlon, which is why does Campbell Wright want to look like RJ?
Did you find out the reason?
No, I did not. I thought he mentioned at some point, like he joked to us about shaving his head because he won two medals at Worlds, but I don't know if this is finally paying up for that or if it's just been really hot and he wanted to be cooler when he was training. But yeah, we need to chat.
You texted me at some point about where you what did you say? It was
I gave
bet?
you the three options: either
or a breakup,
or he wants to look like you. Those are the only three. he's envious
but
of your good looks.
In hindsight, I was wondering in what order you meant to break up. Like, did he shave his head and then she broke up?
And then she broke up?
Or did she break up and then he just shaved his head out of it?
He's like, whatever, I've been wanting to do this anyway. Now that she's out of the picture, I might as well do it. As far as I know, he and Burgett are still together, but I don't know. Maybe we'll chat with him. We'll break some news. This is what everyone really wants to know. Actually, no.
So yeah, second part. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that this is just the second part of the Andrew Chisholm podcast, and not nearly as exciting as. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually much more exciting.
Apparently, you just walk away from it again.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. So this time, we were recording. I was at my office for, a lot of reasons I don't need to get into, but it was not Katie kicking me out.
Because you worked there.
Yeah, I worked there, but it had to do with we had to fit this interview in, and I had this window of time in between doing my actual day job, and then I also was doing a lecture for some residents, and it was going to be a lecture on Zoom, and so I needed to be in the office actually in order to do it, and so I logged into the studio, and the studio I wouldn't let me actually communicate with RJ or Andrew while I was in there, so I had to do it on my phone.
It's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, it was. And so I had to do it on my phone, and my phone battery finally died. I asked my last question, and I think my phone battery died 15 seconds later, and
didn't swap enough.
I was gone.
Or didn't swap early enough.
Yeah, that was it. So that was really sad for me, and so I apologize if there's audio quality issues, because I kept throughout the last hour of the interview, I kept unplugging my headphones and then plugging in my phone to try to charge it up to 10 to 15%, and then I would plug my headphones back in, and it was kind of a mess.
So they don't connect wirelessly?
Those do not, no.
Okay.
No.
I was really hoping
do I
that
have
you
wireless headphones? Yes, I do. Did I have them that day? No. It's just one of those days where everything kind of goes wrong.
You know what? In the end, it was a great conversation, and
it was. Yeah,
it was nice to have some one-on-one time at the end. So it all worked out.
Yeah, you guys were like, "Oh, finally, he's gone." One of the things I noticed about myself, I was every time I would ask a question, I would start it by saying some variation of "So Andrew," as if like. Well,
that was probably to intro to cut me off talking all the time, because
no,
I definitely felt like I was hogging the conversation.
It was because I was so excited about the interview that I had prepared 7 questions. I was like, I want to get these 7 freaking questions in, and so when I would get into them, I had thought about them so much that that's the way I had practiced saying them. So that's why I got into it. Unrelated to anything we've been talking about, and unrelated to anything in biathlon, I have to share this because there's a real question here. So one of my other things I'm really interested and excited about is our movies and movie history. So I've been doing this project lately where I've been trying to go back and fill in some of my the gaps, right? Watch some old silent movies like Charlie Chaplin movies, and just trying to some of the original stuff. And I'm creating this big database, and I'm logging every movie I've ever written or ever watched, excuse me. And it's taking a lot of time, but going through it, one of the things that stands out is that I, watched a lot of, basically every sports movie that's ever been made. And of course, there's no biathlon movie. So if there was a story in biathlon that you wanted to be made into a movie, what would it be?
Well, it's hard to beat the Preutz Lou battle.
Right? Okay, so that's what I
Like
came
that.
to as
That's
well.
yeah. That's like, how can you beat that?
Yeah, and it's like, is it just because it just happened this year, or is it because it was that amazing? And I was
No.
like, it was that amazing.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you consider that, I don't know exactly the point total, but it was over 1,000 points that they both had.
Yeah.
And then to be, what was it, 5 points difference before the last race? Like,
Yeah.
and
I can't get over it. 5 points difference.
And then if it wasn't for that very unfortunate fall, we probably would have had a sprint to the finish line.
Yeah.
Which, in a way, makes it even better. Well, I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. It was awful for Lou, but like, in a way, it was sort of this whole climax coming to the finish, and then, yeah, it was crazy, man. That would be a good movie, but a lot of people would be like, "Come on," as if that would ever happen.
Oh, I know. And then if Lou goes back, if she has this phenomenal season upcoming and wins the overall, wins some gold medals, and then like in the movie, what it would be is like the movie finishes, and then you know how they say like what happened to everybody afterward.
Yeah,
and it would be like Lou Jean Monod came back the next year, and and it would give you that kind of like the goosebumps sensation.
I'm also thinking of the battle with Sturla and JT Bowe in Sturla's first season, but it didn't seem to have that same I don't know, vibe to it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this how many times now, but and it's not just that they were neck and neck, it's that they were neck and neck to win the race, right? It's like, it's not like they were battling for 5th and 6th position. Like to win the overall, they were battling to win the race. And that's just, I don't know, you don't always see it. I feel like so often.
It's not that others gave up. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
they were just racing awesome.
Ulrich was there, right? But yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
There's part of me that thinks that Elvira probably maybe didn't hold back, but she definitely stayed out of the way to not be, in anybody's way or anything.
That's the interview I want. I want Elvira, and I just want to go through what her thought process was like during that last lap. I
do personally think that they really don't have a lot of thought process because they're dead, and their brain is like going nuts, and they're exhausted. I don't know. Like I really can't imagine that they go to the last turn and think, what am I going to do? Am I going to go inside out? Like I think it just kind of happens, the way it happens. But I don't know. I could be 100% wrong, but.
Well, that's why you do all the training. You do the hours and hours and hours and hours of training, so that when the time comes, like your body just does it. That's the idea. That's the theory.
I suppose, but yeah. But I mean, strategy-wise, like I'm sure they went over all scenarios, and then nobody would have come up with this one, right? Yeah. But it must have gone through this scenario. What do we do if if it's a stretch? Do I attack one more time on that last little uphill where you go around the range, or? But
you have to, right? Like you have to give it a chance.
Well, it depends how you feel too.
I know if you got nothing,
because you could also say, as long as you stay very close behind, you're going to have sort of that tuck.
Yeah, the slingshot
after the bump, and then maybe you can swing by it. But that, oh man, that's an image that I will not forget soon. Is Preutz almost falling after that last bump?
Oh, I know.
Because was she?
Yeah,
I would would it be a sprint to the finish?
Oh, I know.
Because I mean, Lou was down for a while.
Would she have gotten up in time? Okay, yeah.
But then to get back up to speed, and Lou's coming full speed down that, man.
Anyway,
well. So
part 2, Andrew Chisholm. Enjoy it because we discussed this in depth. Fun. Just kidding.
Okay.
No, in all seriousness, do enjoy it, and I can't wait to have him on again. And honestly, I'd like to watch as he and Helene sort of put their imprint on the team.
Oh, maybe we can do a live interview.
Well, and it sounds like
Coreside.
That would be a lot of fun. But it sounds like he has a lot of ideas about how to sort of alter, if not like the training regimen, but also like the way that the team is structured and how it's put together. And think that'll be fun.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's a couple changes coming, and not in the sense of it was bad before, but just more like some different ideas, and
exactly. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll hopefully we'll see that pay off in this Olympic year.
All right, enjoy it, everybody.
Cheers. And I don't want this to sound like anything negative on Justin, but is there anything that you feel you want to change compared to previous years?
I think, I've always had my own ideas of how coaching and training and like the development pathways can work and all that. So I think now I have the opportunity, along with Helena, to kind of put some of those ideas forward. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that we're changing this year, we had already discussed with Justin before he left, like in terms of stuff with the physical side and all of that. In the grand scheme of things, there's not a lot of rocket science around the training. But I think the big difference with what we're doing now is we're putting more energy into the national development team than there has been in the past, and on the development or B team side of stuff. And I think that's just more.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like that had been happening enough in the past. That's kind of why we've ended up with a team of 4 in the senior national team, compared to like when I was racing. It was a completely different story. We had a training center out in Quebec, and we had a big group of really competitive athletes internally. And maybe it's reminiscing, maybe those days are gone, but I feel like that's the path forward. When you see these other teams that are doing well, they do have really strong internal competition. So I think we tried to do that in different ways in the years past, whether it was making criteria harder or whatever. But I think in the grand scheme of things, you just have to create a critical mass of athletes that are all hungry and working towards the same thing, wanting to do well. So I think that's a good step forward with what we've done this year with collaborating with that NDT level athlete more and trying to integrate them more into the team.
Right.
And what will that look like? You know, on I guess on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
So what we've done is we've built out our yearly training plan like normal. But part of the feedback that we got at different times too from the athletes was they wanted some flexibility to be able to train with other people if they needed to at times. Like, you know, if they wanted to, like, let's say Benita wants to go for a long ski with Catherine Stewart-Jones one day, or however, just like that being an example, and it had to happen on a Thursday instead of our usual Wednesday long workout. So what we've done is we have green weeks, turquoise weeks, and yellow weeks, and it's just the colors that we use in the training plan. And the green weeks are like the dedicated daily training environment where we'll have between 5 and 8 team sessions, where you're expected to show up, be a part of the team. Like it's almost like a training camp style type thing going on. And the turquoise weeks, that's where you have the flexibility to do not whatever you want, but you know, you've got this week of here's what we need to accomplish. Just chat with us if you want to change some things. We'll still offer group sessions, but if everyone wants to do something else, that's fine. And then the yellow weeks are just the recovery weeks, and those are where the athletes can go away, be on holiday, go home if they're from out of town, whatever. So what we've done with the national development team this year is we've invited them to come train with us at any of the training camps that we're having, but also at any of these green weeks that we're having. So for some of the athletes who are out of town, some will make a trip out to come train with us for a week, but it's more for some of the ones who are in Canmore, then they can join us for pretty solid chunks of time. And it's not every week, but it's usually 2 or 3 weeks out of the month that they're able to join the training environment, and we coach them the same as we would with any of the senior national team athletes that we work with day in, day out.
Sure.
So it's not quite a full-time national development team. That's maybe something that could happen in the future, but it's a good compromise and a good step forward from the way things have been in the past.
Mm-hmm. And what do you? So I'm guessing one problem for athletes from, say, Quebec is just the cost of traveling back and forth and having the time away from home and jobs or study potentially. Like, do you work closely with coaches in Quebec that train those athletes?
Yeah,
or?
so I mean, we've got Jean-Nic Debruck and Charles Rousseau who are out east right now. I mean, but they're in Ottawa, so not all the way out in Quebec. We don't have any athletes based any further east in Quebec right now. So, but Dave Bradley, he's the coach in Chelsea right now, and he's a really good friend of mine. We have a small business together. He used to coach me. So we have a good working relationship with him. And
is that Biathlon
Stocks? That's waxec.ca. Yeah.
Okay.
Biathlon Stocks is all Dave, and waxec.ca is both Dave and I. Yeah. So, but yeah, we have a good relationship with him, and then with the training centers, like, it's been tough the last couple of years, just because there's, I don't know what to call it, estrangement or whatever, but it hasn't been the best collaboration, but we're working towards having better working relationships with them, and I think it's improving, especially because I think Helene and I are relatively fresh faces, or fresh and familiar at the same time. Like, it's a bit of a changing of the guard. So treating it like a blank slate and just trying to make sure that we're all working well together in a good way. But we keep in good communication with pretty much all of the athletes and or their coaches and the development team. So we're trying to be as involved as possible with them, because in the end, when we're out on tour, we have to work with them.
Right. Well, you spend a lot of time together too, right? So you got to have open and honest communication.
To be clear, and I think I don't know if brutally honest is the word, but I'm pretty straight up with everybody about how I'm feeling about things, and I encourage them to be the same with me, just because we're just doing sports right now. Like, it was, I think it was Duff Gibson in his book. He has the quote that the most beautiful thing about sports is it makes you care so much about something that doesn't matter. So, and it's true. So, like, if people are getting really upset, I'd just say, like, we're just playing biathlon right now, like, in the grand scheme. So, as long as you're not getting annoyed with me for me as a person, then I don't care. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. My experience is that at the time it feels harsh when you're blunt and honest, but typically people will say afterwards that at least it got out of the way, it got discussed, and you can move on from there, right? Because if there's stuff lingering, then it's going to bite you in the end anyway.
It's all about delivery too. Like, you just have to make sure that someone's ready to hear some feedback or something. So the comment is, or not the comment, but the question is usually, do you want to hear something to make you feel better, or do you want to hear something to make you get better? So
yeah. How many times do you get the first answer?
It depends. Sometimes it's once in a while, but also it's just even more so, it's just, we ask, are you ready to get some feedback right now? And if they're not ready, then we just say, okay, we'll talk later then.
Yeah. Kind of makes me think of every now and then when I shoot on Monday nights, I just want to shoot prone on big targets, just for that feeling that you can hit 5 without,
Yeah, because you're training with the Fast and Fossil group, right? Yeah.
Yep, you bet. Yeah. Yeah, we were actually supposed to go last Monday because it was supposed to be closed, but apparently the construction of the tunnel has
Been
been
pushed again. It was supposed to
postponed.
close today, and now it closes on Monday.
Okay.
We'll see. Yeah.
Supposedly. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if the construction companies have a hard time finding the location or something, but
So,
Yeah.
it's not ideal.
Andrew, I mean, it seems also like it's a pretty good time. You mentioned it was sort of turning a new page. You've had Emma Lunder retire this year, and then the Gow brothers in the years before that. So you're kind of, I guess, and Adam Reynolds has been around for a couple of years, Benita Pfeiffer, but Emily Dixon, but there's not a ton of people who have been there for a long time. So, where do you start with this group? Do you start sort of like looking at them all with fresh eyes? I mean, do you have goals in mind for them already? I mean, what is your perspective, as this summer is getting underway?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got pretty good information and data on what the athletes have been doing in history, like with their training and all of that. And it's something I didn't mention before, but I've been coaching with Foothills Nordic for a really long time too. So someone like Pascal Parody, I've been coaching her as long as she's been on a 22. So it's not a complete stranger, but I mean, in the springtime, we just kind of take a look at what training did we want them to do last year, what actually got done, what are some gaps, and gaps for individual athletes, but also as a whole, like where are we struggling as a team? And then we come up with what we think as coaches they should be working on, and then it turns into a discussion with the athletes as well. And we have usually one kind of debrief and planning meeting right at the end of the season, and then I guess another big change this year, not big, but a subtle change, is that we're just meeting with the athletes more and having them be a bit more involved with what actual training they're doing. And I mean, it's pretty rare that we make any big changes, but we might change, like Nadia Moser likes to go for swims, like a lane swim instead of a run or something like that. So we just try to adapt little pieces like that. But and then with the national development team athletes, it kind of depends on the athlete, because a lot of them have their own coaches that they work with at home. And we try to talk with those coaches just to see what's going on. But some who train a bit more individually, we send them what we're doing with the team, and we try to help them adapt it to their own schedules or to their own needs. So, like, we have some athletes who are in university or applying into medical school, like all of this stuff. So there's different needs and capacities that they're able to work certain parts of the week. So we just try to help them get to the proper amount of training and at the proper times of the year.
And how involved are you? Because I think one of the problems in countries like Canada is that a lot of youth, I don't know, the transition from kind of a youth junior level to full-time IBU Cup, World Cup level. Like, how do you encourage kids to actually make the jump and stay in, biathlete as an athlete full-time?
I mean, that's the age-old question, is how do we retain athletes? And part of it is, how can we make it sustainable, mainly financially for them? And the sport is just getting a lot more expensive at times, because two of our two main training centers and two of the most expensive places in Canada right now, in Canmore and Whistler. And so we have to find ways to either support, or not necessarily support financially, but support them training elsewhere, or can we find places for them to stay that aren't so expensive here? But I think part of it, for sure, it's kind of like, developing wax sticks at the same time, is how can we show the athletes that this can be a profession? And that turns into talking about fundraising or finding sponsors and talking about prize money when you get good enough. There's ways to make money in the sport, but for sure we have a lot of work to do there, just because like even when I was an athlete, I was trying to do university at the same time, and I was driving 800 kilometers a week back and forth between Calgary and Canmore, and that's tough to do well. You end up just doing a bad job of being an athlete and a bad job of being a student. But there are some that they do online school and all that, and that helps them financially because there's some scholarships, or I know in Quebec there's pretty good support for student athletes as well. That's why someone like Jean-Nic Debruck will stay out east, because he can be a student, he gets support from the Quebec government to train there. And there's programs in place to help them, but we can always do better, because we don't want this topic of money to always be such a burden on everybody. It's also tough then to ask them to do things like to pay for a training camp here, or to spend money to do this or that, when we know how difficult financially it is.
Right. And is the financial support pretty much all coming from the Canadian Olympic Committee?
Yeah, like the Own the Podium money, we don't have a lot of it, and we got cut again this year, but I think pretty much everybody got cut this year. But we're always looking for sponsors and donors and things like that. Like the athletes have done a really good job in the past few years with their Shoot for Gold fundraiser. It didn't happen this past year, but it's one way that they make money to help offset some costs. There's one guy in Germany, actually. His name's Mike Semisch. He has this company, Biathlon Travel, and he's supported quite a few. He used to support the team as a whole, but he helps athletes find sponsors in Europe as well. And that's probably one route to go, just because you don't see biathlon on TV very often here, so it's tough to market it. But
yeah, how did you? I found that such a disappointment at the World Cup. There was no CBC presence
but
at all.
It just wasn't a big one. Yeah. It wasn't
really?
Super noticeable, but it wasn't like in, I want to say 2016, I think it was. We had live coverage of the World Cup, I believe, and it got better viewership than Hockey Day in Canada, which is massive.
Oh, wow.
And the viewership in Europe was also massive as well, because how can you take a bad photo or a bad image of the race courses in Canmore? It's absolutely beautiful here. And biathlon's an exciting sport, so you'd think it would be easy to market, but it's just when it's not on TV, people aren't that interested. Like an oil company would be way more interested in going and supporting like a Timbits hockey team in a community than they would be to support the national biathlon team, where like they're not pandering to the same market there.
Right.
Yeah.
And because I'm guessing one reason why CBC didn't have it is because Eurovision has the broadcasting rights, I guess, in North America. But like,
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know that there was a big push and thing to get the rights for CBC back in 2016, but I wasn't paying close enough attention, to be honest, for 2019 or 2024, what was going on there.
Yeah, because it's just unfortunate, right? Because you always end up in this loop of there's not enough money, so it's really hard to compete, and then TV's not interested. Yeah. But at the same time, if you have and the World Cup, we were so lucky with the weather. Maybe not for the athletes, because I'm sure it was pretty hard to ski in plus 16 or whatever it was. But I mean, would have been a fantastic
Yep.
show on TV.
I mean, I think that
And
there's some good discussions happening, at least in the background, with some potential sponsors, I hope. And I know that there's a good push happening. Definitely, we've done a lot of work this spring and end of winter about how we can restructure the organization a bit so that Carrie, for example, our CEO, can do more work on trying to raise funds for us. And it's not going to happen overnight, but there's at least plans in place, and they're trying to be put into motion.
right.
But it's like a freight train, it takes a bit to get it moving, but once it gets going, then you just have to kind of give it a little push here and then. But when that comes to a complete stop, it's hard to get it going again.
Jordan, do you have more questions about like finances and organization?
Not so much a question. Just I think that it's one of those things where you just kind of hope that as a fan, right? That this is a really fun sport, and you just want more people to see it. And so it's like you just need someone to be willing to take the risk, right? To put the money in to increase the exposure, and then you hope that it's just going to have this snowball effect eventually. But
you need someone to kind of get excited about it and want to be invested. And like, we do have some awesome supporters and donors for the team right now, but it's just we just need to find more avenues and make it a bit more sustainable with that. I mean, you look at the German team with Wiesmann or BMW, or they had Wirth for forever, but Wirth just left them actually too, and
Kaufmann or something. The Lidl supermarket.
Oh, Kaufland
is part of
Kaufland.
Yeah,
And we've got equipment support too. Like, we get most of our ammunition covered by Lapua. They've kept us afloat, whether they realize it or not, for a few years now. They've helped us a lot there, but I mean, I think it's kind of.
I think that's often sort of forgotten when people think about the cost. Like, obviously the rifles are expensive, but I always say, well, they do keep their value. But yeah, I mean, I go through 2 boxes on a practice session, but I'm guessing that national athletes will use a little bit more just for any practice.
It depends on the practice. Usually we do between sort of like 90 and 200 rounds of practice, depending on the volume and the time of year. And we try to get them to shoot between 11 and 14,000 rounds a year. So it's not cheap, but through ammo that had been purchased and provided through sponsorships, just because we have an agreement with Lapua, we're able to offset or eliminate a lot of that cost. So that helps a lot. And even Lapua, it's always open for us to go each year to test ammunition at the factory. So we bring the rifles there, and then they help us choose good ammunition for each rifle, and then it just comes out.
Okay, is that
that's
Czech
in
Republic?
Schönebeck in Germany. Yeah.
Okay. And is that where
Lapua is
Lapua is from
Finland.
as well, or are they from different country?
Yeah.
Oh, Finland. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask. I'm a big rifle tinkerer. I'm always,
me too.
3D printing stuff and cutting with wood and stuff. How does that go in the national team if somebody either like breaks a piece, or if they're like, I just need to change something? Are you literally like getting some piece of wood and helping out cutting and shaving and that kind of thing? Or
there's a couple of, there's lots of different avenues to do that. going into Beijing, like Scott Gow was playing a lot with 3D design and stuff like that. And it was actually while I was in quarantine at one point when we had to do that all the time. Flying back, I was flying back and forth a lot between Europe and Canada at that time. And one of the times I was in quarantine, I bought my first 3D printer because he had been fooling around with an old one from Nathan Smith. And then I just bought, at that time it was pretty good, but it was the Ender 3 Pro. And like now that's like the lot of 3D printers, it seems like. But I started printing parts for the team then. And we were playing with 3D scanners and stuff like that. But what I actually found myself was when we would scan and print, it wouldn't come out exactly as you wanted. So I started working much more with the wood then. And I actually made a standing block for Christian Gow. I've made different parts for different athletes over the years, and I've made a few stocks. I made my own stock when I was an athlete and raced with it. And but we generally now, as a coach, I'm trying to lean more towards not minimalistic, but not so much fancy stuff on the rifle. Just because, if something does break, it can be hard to replace. But also, the noise around like a big fancy butt hook or something like that can be a bit too much. And on top of that, my philosophy is, you want a lot of pressure straight into the shoulder, and you don't want to be relying too much on something hanging on top there. So I actually try to have everybody with just like a little nub hanging off their shoulder act as a reference, so it's going in the same place every time. The hook underneath for the standing, that can be a bit more personalized, but we try to just have it different lengths as opposed to different shapes. Just because, if something does break, then you're scrambling at the last moment. And with the standing blocks for like where you have it sitting there, that we get a bit more creative with, but I still try to make sure it's made out of a bit more solid of a material, just because you can print out a bunch of spares, but then you're carrying around a bag full of stuff all winter.
Right. Yeah, because I know we've talked to Logan in the past, and I know he's a big fan of the printing, but he was alluding to that same issue with, if something breaks, unless you carry a printer with you, then it's pretty hard to deal with. And I don't know, I have an Ender 3 as well, and printing fast is definitely not one of his features. So.
It's like not graduation. I guess it was a graduation thing, but when I finished up the second level course with the IBU is gift for myself, I bought a new bamboo printer, and that was like night and day. Like that's an actual tool for me. Like I use it for everything now, it seems like, because there's such a vast library of stuff out there. Like if I break something on my table saw or whatever, I just type in the model number and this part, and someone's probably designed a replacement part for it already.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what's out there and how many things are out there for free, actually. Even
exactly.
Parts are. And then, so I'm guessing the bamboo is more like one of those enclosed ones where you can easily use different materials.
It's an enclosed one. It prints really fast. I think it's called a Core XY printer. So it has the 4 posts that move up and down. And it's enclosed so it stays warm, which is good because I think my basement's always about 10 degrees all times of the year. So it's for sure, it's been a good tool for myself and for the team, because like even the other day we were trying something different for Benita in the prone position, and we talked about it. I went home and I printed it and I brought it to the practice the next morning, and she's going to try it. So it's not so much like pressing the button and hoping that it's going to work. Like this really I ask it to do something and it does it.
Have you worked with that? I forgot the name now. It's a type of clay, but it's more like a plasticky. Like you have to massage it, and then it becomes softer, and you can, manipulate it, and then you can either let it just kind of dry that way, and it stays in that position or that shape, but you can sort of soften it again. But if you put it in the oven, you can actually harden it so that it stays in that shape forever.
Yeah, I've heard about
Is it
that.
polymer
I haven't, just because I don't have a 3D scanner myself. And I think it's quite heavy in the end. And that's something we think about with the rifles too. We don't want to make them too heavy. But
yeah. No, I've only used it for, getting a piece that fits my hand perfectly, and then I try to replicate it in wood. And maybe in the future, I'm hoping to get it into a 3D shape for the
played
printer.
With plasticine before when I think Scott had some 3D scanning app that we could play with a bit. But, and I know Dave with Biathlon Stocks, we talked about this box he could ship out to people with some modeling clay, and then they can mold their own part exactly how they want it on the rifle, and then you mail it back, and it's an enclosed thing so it won't shake around or anything like that, and then he scans it and 3D prints it, so then you can have really personalized
2 years later, because Canada Post
we stopped using Canada Post mostly. That was a nightmare.
And have you with the, we talked about if 3D printed parts break, you have a bit of an issue, but have you noticed any issues with the weather? Like when it's really cold or +2, like does it impact the 3D printed parts at all?
I haven't noticed it yet. I'm just trying to think. The very early 3D printed parts back in 2018, I think those are just made poorly. Like before we were playing with it, those would just break if you looked at them the wrong way, I felt like. But the only time that I've seen parts break are usually just in a really bad crash. And it didn't seem to matter about the temperature. Like I had printed one butt plate for Emma Lunder, and it lasted a few years, and it was finally just when she crashed. And I don't think it would have mattered what the material was at that point. It probably would have broken. And then same with Lucas Smith. He had a 3D printed stock, and he had a pretty massive crash, and I don't think it would have mattered what the rifle was made of at that point. It came back in multiple pieces. Yeah.
And you mentioned the Biathlon family being pretty close-knit group. Do you get a lot of support from like German stock builders, or like if something happens on race day, are there people ready to jump in?
For sure. Like you can go ask anybody for help, and if they have something, they'll give it to you. And it's and we have a pretty good network of coaches now. Like we're all friends, and we can run over and ask for almost anything. Help each other out. It was during the World Cup in Ruhpolding, I want to say 2023, I think it was. And Vanessa Voigt was having some issues with her sight, and they were trying to burn something out of it. And I came over with my dental picks, just because I had them in my backpack at the time. We were digging stuff out of it with the coach, Christian, then. And then Christian and Sverre, the Norwegian guy that's coaching with them. And then it was later on, just before the race was starting, I had put on some warmer pants on top of the pants I had on then. And then I was in the start area with one of the coaches, or a couple of the athletes talking with the other coaches. And then Sverre came over. It's like, oh, do you have your lighter? We need to try and burn something out. The cameras were following at that time, and I was like, oh, crap, it's in my other pants. And then the camera sees me put my hand down into my pants and then pull out his lighter. And then I was like, I can only imagine what they were saying. I saw it up on the big screen afterwards. Like, oh, that's a little bit awkward, but couldn't see my face, so I wasn't too embarrassed about it. But you know, everyone's really helpful. Like, even when I was on the IBU Cup and Lucas Smith, when he broke his stock, I got the call on the radio that, his rifle's destroyed, and we don't have a spare rifle on IBU Cup. So I just walked over to the American team, and the coach is Mike Gibson. He's a guy I'm good friends with, and we used to race together. I was like, Mike, I need to ask you a favor. He's like, okay, what is it? He's like, can I borrow your spare rifle for this race? I'm like, yeah, sure. I didn't. So, yeah, and then Lucas came, and
that's cool.
He shot well with it. So it's.
And then he had to give it back.
That's really impressive, because to shoot with a different rifle.
We do that as a drill every once in a while, and you'll see athletes shoot really well all of a sudden. It's because instead of them just being complacent with what they're doing, they're actually having to think about, is my sight picture good? Am I stop my breath? Am I squeezing the trigger? They slow down a bit, and not necessarily slow down, but they just care that little bit more to make sure that it's a good shot.
Yeah. Does it still happen that they're like, oh, I want to, the diopter like that?
Every once in a while, like, they might try something, and it'll be more like a trigger or like the bolt handle. But a lot of the time, it's like, oh, that's nice, that's cool. But when they go back to their own rifle, it still feels like home.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to laugh with a couple of years ago when the IBU Cup was in Camor. I dropped a French and an Austrian athlete at their hotel because the weather was just crap. And I made the mistake of saying, here, give me your rifle, I'll put it in the back. And they're like, no, you're not touching. And I can relate to that. We do that exercise sometimes where we use each other's rifle, and that's totally fine. But if somebody would say, I'll take it with me and I'll shoot with it tomorrow, I don't know.
The rifles are a funny thing for some people.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have a guy on our group on Monday nights who has the rifle of a former athlete. I don't know if he bought it off him or if he's just borrowing it. But I know some people, as soon as they're done, they get rid of it, and others hold on to it for the rest of their life. I know in Europe, I was listening to a German podcast, and Benny Dole said as soon as he stopped biathlon, he basically had to give it back because of the regulations there. And I think Denise Herman, same thing, because one of the there's a really young German athlete on the women's team. She's using Denise Herman's rifle. A lot of the time,
the athletes don't actually own their rifle. It's registered to the federation, just because of it has a bit to do, I believe, with the ammunition transportation rules, because there, if I understand properly, you can only have 5,000 rounds per rifle on your rifle passport. So if you're traveling with a team's worth of ammunition, you need to have enough rifles on your passport to say you can have like 30,000 rounds or something like that. So the rifles will get registered to a coach. So it's, I'm not totally clear. I know everyone thinks like America is the gun place, but Canada is very easy to have as many rifles and ammunition as you want, and it's a bit difficult when we go overseas.
Right.
Because we don't have the registry anymore, so they're asking, like, we need to see your rifle papers. Like, we don't have any. Like, why? Like, they don't exist. Just, here's my license, but there's no papers.
Yeah, it's and I wonder too if it's must be also related to either the army or the
Yeah, that's part
customs
of it
that they
too.
typically work for.
It's a bit different in every country. We were just actually talking about that with Jean-Marc Chablot in when I was in Ostersund a couple of weeks ago, and the regulations around that and the differences between Sweden and Germany and Switzerland, it can cause them some problems from time to time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because he's with the
he's the
Swedish
shooting coach
Federation,
for the
I believe,
Swedish
right?
team.
Yeah. Are you going to do the same next season, where in between shootings you're going to show the spread of
I won't
the
shout it.
shots? I don't know who you would. Yeah, they have the Swedish. I watch the races on the Swedish TV sometimes, and they actually have the Swedish TV crew talking about and looking at the shot picture.
What we do is like during the race, we'll watch the shooting, of course, and then we have a WhatsApp group with each of the athletes, but also with the technicians if needed out on course. So if it's a race like a pursuit or an individual where they need to see the group, they get a picture right away, and then they have the board where they can show it. But we take the photos and we send it to the athletes during the race. So then after the race, they can see right away for their post-race debrief or where their shots were for each shooting bout.
Okay. Do you use it after the season to sort of
and that's something
on top?
He's now the head coach for the women in Czech, Jakub Prochaska. He started doing that with the BATC a bit when he was coaching here in Canada with them. But now, and that was, I think it's just for each week he was doing that. But 2 seasons ago now, I did something similar where I took all of the shots for prone and all of the shots for standing. And we could kind of see some trends with athletes where they were missing or where they were hitting a lot. And it just let us help guide some things that we would work on for at least the start of the season. And I mean, a lot of the time you know it already just by instinct. It's like, oh, this person's always missing high or whatever. But it lets you have a bit more insight and try to make some bigger or might only be a slight change, but it lets you address it so they have a better chance to hit.
Right. Oh, that's cool. Jordan, did you have any other things you wanted to bring up? I know we've been taking a lot of your time already.
A lot of my time. No, I've been sitting here listening to you guys nerd out about rifles for a while. That's been awesome. So I appreciate that.
So Jordan, like I said, currently lives in Florida, but is in the process of moving to Calgary.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then once that happens, I'm sure it won't be long before he starts joining me on my weekly trip to Canmore.
Yeah, you're going to have to put up with me out there.
You'll start nerding out pretty soon.
Yeah. No, I honestly, the only 2 questions I had left was one, way back at the very start, I asked you, what did your day look like on a race day? And I think we got about 20 minutes into it. You're carrying bullets around, and then we suddenly got distracted by 17 other things. And then my other question was just in this season, right? And it's a big season. Any season that's an Olympic season, big season, but also your first year officially as the head coach. What does success look like? So how would you guys at the end of the year say, you know what, that was a successful year?
Yeah, so you cut out a bit there. Got kind of robot Jordan for a bit. But I think the first question was you were the first question was like you wanted to know more of what the race day looks like after we get the ammunition and get it set up.
Yeah.
So I guess we get the ammunition, we set it out, and then the athletes arrive. And I guess there's multiple things happening at once. If you're by yourself, you'll usually try to ski the course a bit and get kind of the lay of the land for that given day. You might go to the range and try to get a look at the wind to see how things are moving before the athletes arrive. And if you're by yourself, you might do both, or you might ask the techs how the snow was and what the conditions are like. You're just trying to get as much information as you can for the athletes before they arrive. And then after that, you go out, you go through the training session with the athletes, whether it's race prep or regular training day. You start the zero and then you run through it. If it's a race day, then you've got to run and get the bibs from the competition office and have them ready for when the athletes arrive. You go through the zero, and that's usually pretty easy process now at this point. They're pretty well organized. There's the two halves of the zero. So you do 2 athletes in each half. Then we do the final checks with the techs, get the equipment sorted out to go out on course, like spare poles, spare skis, radios, either the race or the training happens. You'll have a quick debrief with the other coaches or techs or the athletes at the stadium, and then you let the athletes go on their way, either with the official transport or with one of the staff driving them. You might have to go do the registration for the race the next day, or there's always something to do. You're usually getting home right around or just before dinner time. And then you're sorting out whatever information you need to have for the athletes after dinner. I usually try to have a meeting every day or two, definitely before each race day. And then, you're usually wrapping up 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and then just repeat. It's pretty full on, like 10, 12-hour days.
Do you have any, do you go through some of the race data
for
of
sure.
the day after?
Because the data center does an okay job of all of that, so you can see the shooting times. But the other thing we have to remember is a lot of those shooting times are volunteer driven per se. So that's when the volunteer says the athlete has started. So sometimes you'll see some really fast or really slow shooting times. It doesn't add up. So it's kind of up to us to maybe have a stopwatch going, but it's gotten better over the years. But we'll go through that. We'll get course times, lap times, certain split times. And the thing is, a lot of the athletes maybe love looking through that a bit too much themselves. So it's usually us trying to help them get like see it in good context as well, because they have a pretty good understanding of it sometimes, but every once in a while, like especially on the men's side, it's like, holy crap, I was 52 seconds back at 1.5 Ks. It's like, yeah, but Johannes was 24 seconds ahead of second place at that point, so you're actually 28 seconds back, or something like that. You just have to make sure they're seeing all the data in the good context. But we might go through that, or it might just be a lot more higher level or even qualitative stuff where what did you feel here or there, and then we try to cross-reference that with what was actually happening in the race, and we might look at some video that was taken during the race. And it's a lot of debrief, be finished with the day, move on, get ready for the next one. We don't want to dwell too long because it moves at a pretty good pace on tour. So if you're thinking about something that happened 2 days ago, you're not doing a good job of what's happening in the moment.
Right. Do you know if those the plates that register every shot, do they have a timing associated or connected to them?
Curvinen has a website where they put up all their races, and then Hora as well puts up all the race shooting times.
Behind
it's just public.
a login, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things that I'm hoping to do is to either create some sound files or whatever so that we can simulate some of the faster shooting bouts from people. So we'll say go, and then you'll hear like some kind of tone when the first shot was going off and then when each shot was going after that. So that we might not have Johannes or Amelia Jacqueline or whoever around, but you can at least hear what it was like on that given day and try to keep up or stay behind, however, like have that reference of a shooting speed. No.
Yeah, I wouldn't add button to that because that may be a bit frustrating.
But, like there's been some really fast shooting bouts, and the perception of speed of shooting, it's quite funny with some athletes. I remember with a couple, and I was like, I'm shooting really slow right now. And I was like, I don't think you are. And then we look at the times, and I was like, no, you're actually shooting totally fine. It's what you're doing in training all the time.
Yeah, Canada is always, we're seeing a bit of a catch-up from the field, but they're often in the top 10, 15 when it comes to shooting times.
The old shooting coach, Pavel Lantsov, the Russian guy, the first year when he came in, they were all shooting really, really fast all of a sudden, but the percentages dropped a lot. And then the percentages came up as they got used to it.
Right.
But there was a bit of a shift with some of the athletes. They didn't want to put in the same volume of shooting because they thought it was too exhausting. So it changed, and they did start shooting a little bit slower for a bit, but then some of them still had the capacity to shoot fast, but we are going to start reintroducing some speed this year, just because that's some of the easiest seconds to gain back on the course.
Right. And is that mostly like time in between shots, or
it's the setup like most of the time
for the first shot?
Because most of the time they're like a second and a half to or like 1.2 to 1.8 seconds between shots. That's basically what everybody does. That's just the time it takes to do one breath.
Right.
And that you don't really want to rush too much. Some athletes can shoot without taking breaths between shots, and that's high risk, not always high reward. But it's you can really intimidate people by doing that too. When you come in, you get set up, and you blast off 5 shots and get out of there. Like, it makes the other athletes start thinking if they're not too mentally tough. But I'd say that's really where a lot of other teams are starting to put that investment, is the mental training to have that mental toughness on the range. So it's not easy to rattle athletes the same way as it was back even 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I still remember, I think I mentioned this to Jordan before. There was a video of, it's a kind of comedian in Norway that does TV shows. And he had Theo Lagerhoff. And he was dressed up like in a leather and put a snake around the neck. And it's like, well, if you can still hit when that happens, then you don't get too razzled. But, I mean, a full homocolon is something quite different as well. I think that was it for me.
Yeah, my last question was just, what does success look like this year?
That's a tough question. Everyone wants to just say we want to win medals, we want to win all the podiums and things like that. But, for me, if we can see marked improvement in all of the athletes, that's a success. I think that we can always have a chance in some relays every once in a while. Like we saw in RuPoling this year, we were in the mix for quite a bit with the men. And I'd say we had a pretty inexperienced overall men's team. We had Adam, who's been to an Olympics already, but then we had Logan and Halden and Jasper. And they were in the mix for a pretty long time. Like, I think after 3 legs, we'd only used 1 spare.
I know. Yeah.
And the record on World Cup, I think, is 3 spares total. And I was thinking, like, holy crap, we might break the record or tie the record today. But now the record in
I think Norway
European Championships,
had one, right?
they did 1 spare, so it's still not on World Cup. But that's the best relay I've ever seen, I think, is 1 spare total. Yeah. But they were in it for a bit, and like I will never forget when Jasper went out, and like Jasper's a fairly young athlete, like he's still a junior at this point, but he closed the gap on Martin Ponsiluoma, and I was like, oh, okay, he's really going for it right now. And, like you love to see that,
no kidding.
Just like going out like bulldogs and trying to keep up with anybody. But we'll have a young team in general. Like we won't have anyone other than Adam with Olympic experience. I think. He'll be the one with the Olympic experience on the team.
Right.
So no.
Has Halden been like as a backup, or
it was only Emma who had been to the Olympics otherwise. So I think it's tough to expect anything miraculous, but everyone wants to win a medal, and we're all thinking about trying to get a top result like that. And we'll see what happens earlier in the season, but I think the relays are always something where something can happen. Usually it shakes out by the end.
Right. For sure.
It's not that the podium is always booked, but if there's going to be something awesome happen, it will be in the relays. But I think the team is really putting in really good work this spring. We're seeing them handle training load a bit better than usual. I don't know why right now. We'll be able to try and figure that out at the end of the year probably, but there's always a bit of extra motivation around these Olympic years too, and a bit more attention to detail with recovery and everything like that. But I think as long as we see everybody improve and put in, let's call it like these expected performances, then I think that would be success, because we're at this point, we're not a team that can say we need to have podiums, we need to have wins. It's where we're striving for, but it's tough to go out and say that when you haven't been living that yet. But I think that we're definitely shifting this expectation of wanting to just go to the Olympics versus I want to do well at the Olympics. And we're shifting focuses and what we really believe that we can do. So I hope that will result in some great performances this winter. Yeah, sure.
Can I actually ask you one more question as well? You mentioned earlier that you had been working with Pascal Paradis for a number of years now, and RJ's heard me, praise her for 3 or 4 years now. What is it about her that has had? I mean, she's obviously had success at a relatively young age for a Canadian athlete. So, what is it about her that has sort of brought this about?
I mean, she's always just had some talent for sure. Like, I mean, her first World Youth and I think it was her first international competition ever. She came, I think, 5th or 6th place at the World Youth Championships in Otapa. And I think she's just been putting in the work year after year. I mean, she's been at university in Alaska the last couple of years, and she graduated last spring. And I mean, we've got lots of strong athletes in the team at this point for what we've got, and they're all putting in good work. And I think what you see with Pascal is she's just put in consistent work year after year. So And she's got a pretty good mindset with the shooting too. Like she just goes out and does what she's comfortable with, and I think that results in some what we would call really good performances, but it's just kind of her level. And a lot of the time, I can attribute Helena to saying this, but when people have these good performances, it's not something that they've done above and beyond something they've never done before. That's just they've done their normal. And I think that's maybe what Pascal is able to do a bit more often, is that she just does her normal. But it's also what we're just trying to strive with everybody. Like we saw it with Benita. When we see Adam have these great performances, he's just doing what he does all the time. And see it with Nadia too, when she has these great performances. It's just kind of like, yes, it's not like he or she has done something that was unbelievable. It's like this sense of relief. It's like, I did it. Like I did what I knew I could do. So I think once we kind of instill that we are doing good work and their normal is good enough, then we'll start seeing these cool performances per se. Like, whether it's a Luke Holshoff coming top 10 at World Youth, or women having a top 10 in the relay. Like, it's just like, we just need to believe in ourselves a bit and have faith in the work that we're doing. And I think that is a really good shift with what we're seeing too. The culture around the training and how everyone is working and cooperating this year. There is this sense of we're putting in good work and we're getting ready for a good season this year.
Yeah,
I think that's a beaut.
I was just saying the bones are there. The pieces are there.
The facilities,
right?
We've got a lot of athletes. We got like just a good training environment, and like between the cross country skiers and the biathletes, there's enough training partners around here, and like it's part of the reason why we're trying to engage the NDT more as well. We're just trying to bring everybody in. Maybe it's not all the time, but make sure that they're feeling that we want to support them, and maybe it's enough to help them do a bit, not better work, but buy into the work that they're doing at home a bit more. And just trying to build up this culture of biathlon in Canada, which I think we have. Oh, lost Jordan. But, it's not like we're Norway or Sweden or anything like that, where we have this history of strong biathletes all the time, but we want to get to that point.
Right. I was actually expecting you to say that Pascal just had a really good coach at a very young age, but
she did have great coaches at a young age, but the work that we've done in foothills, like we're all ex-national team or racing at international level at some point. So maybe there's some advantages there, but it was just a really strong group of athletes who were competitive and enjoyed pushing each other and wanting to get better. But Pascal's also had a great upbringing too. Like her family would go on these big long bike trips and everything, and they go camping. They spend lots of time outdoors, and it's these athletes that are just magically amazing. It seems like it's not all the time that they come from these families of professional athletes in the past. Like it's usually just people that are active, and they got put in sport and they had some kind of basis, and they decided they liked to be competitive. So they just develop from there.
Yeah. very, very last question, just out of curiosity. I always say Pascal Paradis. Is it? It's obviously a French name, but
Pascal Paradis.
Is that how you guys pronounce it, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her family on her father's side is Métis, I believe. But there's it's for sure a French Canadian name, and then her mother's side of the family is actually Dutch. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What did they say?
Those are the best.
If it's not Dutch, it ain't much.
Yeah, that's a good saying. I'll stick with that. All right. Jordan just messaged that his phone died. So I think that's a good indication that we're going to finish up. But thank you so much for taking all this time to sit down with us. And like I said, it was long overdue, but I think we caught up a bit here. And maybe at some point during the season we can catch up with you.
Sit down and chat. I love to talk about our team and get us out there more. So I want people to know what we're doing.
Yeah, no, it's what we can do. Excellent. Well, thank you again. Also on Jordan's behalf.
Yeah, thanks to you both. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll chat soon.